All right, so we're going to continue looking at Bible prophecy, and today our topic is going to be the little horn of Daniel chapter 7. The little horn of Daniel 7. So we had looked last week at the four beasts of Daniel chapter 7. So we kind of set up and I'll use the technology version of the Bible here. We looked last week at the four beasts of Daniel chapter 7. And we saw that it's the same four empires that are in Daniel chapter 2. But then we stopped after the division of the fourth empire, which is Rome. Rome broke up into 10 pieces. And we kind of stopped and said, what's next? Oh, okay, we'll look at that next week. So this is the next week. This is what we're looking at now. So just a quick review. We saw that the same four metals of Daniel chapter 2 is the same thing as the four beasts in Daniel chapter 7. And again, those four world empires are Babylon, Medo-Persia, or sometimes referred to as the Persian Empire, Greece, and Rome. And those are the four. And then the fourth one, it says it's not conquered by a fifth, but it says the kingdom is divided, and that's symbolized by the feet and toes of iron and clay. And then the fourth beast has 10 horns, so 10 kings or 10 divisions of that fourth empire show up. So that's kind of the background there. Now I'm going to go over this as if this is being a lesson given to somebody who doesn't know this background information. I know you guys got this last week and we went over who the harlot was. We've gone over that a couple times. But for the sake of those watching on YouTube, I'm going to go over it as if, you haven't heard this. So we're going to look at the identity of the little horn, which is the same as the great harlot, and we've already discussed that, but we're going to go through the characteristics just to prove it. Now, when we went through this, when we discussed the great harlot of Revelation 17, I gave 8 characteristics to prove who that was. And remember I mentioned that there is over 30 in the Bible? Mm-hmm. You remember me mentioning that? Yeah. Well, there's a lot of characteristics to pinpoint who this Antichrist power, the little horn, the great harlot of Revelation 17. So even though we've gone over the quick version, the 8 characteristics, I wanted to go back through and say, well, let's make sure, and let's look at more of those 30 characteristics. So the little horn, just because I like to touch all the bases.
It's phenomenal.
Let's go through the little horn and let's get more characteristics, and it'll be even more clear. So, what about the time? And what about 476 AD until the end of time? So we looked at up until the dividing of the Roman Empire, right? And that happened, Rome fell around 476 AD. Rome wasn't built in a day, didn't fall in a day, but around then, right? So, think of God the way he does this. From the time of Daniel, he covers every major world empire for hundreds of years. For about 1,000 years, look at that. 605 BC all the way to the end of Rome, 476 AD. Mm-hmm. So he covers, and it's in order. He doesn't really leave big giant gaps. So at the end of the Roman Empire, Rome is divided. Daniel chapter 2 leaves us with the idea that the fourth is divided, the toes and clay, and then it goes into the second coming. It's coming at some point. Now that's a big gap between 476 AD to the second coming. That's, 1,500 years depending on when Jesus comes, but it's been about 1,500 years since then, right? And we believe he's coming soon, we don't know when, but that's about a 1,500 year gap. So it makes sense that God would want to go back and say, okay, well, this fills the gap. So when he goes into Daniel chapter 7, the same thing happens, but when we get to the fourth empire, after it's divided into 10, there's a new power that comes on the scene, and that fills in that gap from about 476 AD until the end of time. The main figure in Daniel 7, after the fall of Rome, is the little horn. And that's the main power from then, and really it says until the end of time. So, looking at the little horn. Now this is that picture that I had in our prophecy seminar. Do you guys remember where this is from? You remember that?
Somewhere in England or something.
Germany.
Germany, man.
Close.
Was that in Germany or was it?
Yes. Yes, it's in
I
Germany.
was thinking German, like in Munich or Nuremberg. or
This is
something.
Nuremberg, yeah,
Nuremberg, okay.
this is the city hall, this is the town city hall in Nuremberg, the old city hall building. And they call it the Rathaus, or Rosshaus, I'm not sure how they pronounce it. But above the entryway to the city hall, they had 4 statues.
Yes,
You remember that?
yes.
And each one of the 4 statues was one of the 4 beasts of Daniel. And they put it next to a king of the empire that it represented, because they wanted to put this interpretation in stone so that people would not forget it. Isn't that interesting?
Mhm.
And the 4th beast is this one, it's not described in the Bible what animal it's compared to. So they just kind of made it look like, I don't know what that is, but, and then it has 10 horns, that's how you know it's the 4th one. And on the other side of it, there's a statue of Julius Caesar to show that they believe this symbolized Rome, this 4th beast. But then they were very cute. With these 10 horns, they put this little horn. You see that? See that little face there?
Yes, right in the middle.
Yeah, that little
Oh,
face there on the
yeah.
horn. Because the little horn is described as having eyes like the eyes of a man and a mouth speaking. So they gave a little face, and that's their depiction of the little horn. Pretty interesting, right?
Mhm.
And they did that so that people would not forget the historical interpretation of prophecy. The sad thing is, if you go to the streets there today, I've seen someone do this. They interview people as they walk by. Nobody knows what this is anymore. Even though it's in stone above the town hall building.
Wow,
Ask them, what do you know what this means? I have no idea.
no kidding.
Nobody knows what it means anymore. Churches don't teach this anymore.
Jeez.
Nobody knows what it means.
So
So-
we do.
Yes, we will study it.
We do.
You know, that's the interesting thing about studying the Word is that all you got to do is cling to the truth, and the world doesn't like it, and then you're like, well, I have this amazing truth. If you guys don't value it, I will. You know? So
Amen.
just value the truth.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Amen. Wow.
So let's look at Daniel chapter 7. And the first 7 verses cover the first 4 beasts. But then we're going to look starting in verse 8. So we're continuing on. We've looked at the 4 beasts: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. And now in verse 8, we'll pick it up. Can somebody read verse 8 for us, please? Daniel 7, verse 8.
I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. And there in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words.
All right, thank you. Interesting, right? So we're going to go through the characteristics, and there's several verses on this subject. By the way, you will notice if you look through the word count and the verses, there is about the same amount of words dedicated to just the little horn as there is to all 4 of the other beasts.
Wow.
So the little horn is the focus. It gets most of the attention in Daniel chapter 7. So we probably should know what it is.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm going to go through the characteristics and we'll identify who this is. The first thing I want you to notice in this verse is that it says, I consider the horns, that would be the 10 horns, right?
Yeah.
And there came up among them another little horn. Among them. Now, think of it this way. If I was to show up among you guys, if I show up here among you, then you must have already been here for me to show up, right? We must be contemporaneous. Does that make sense? So this is referring to both the timing and the location of the little horn. It is among the 10 horns.
So 11. 11.
Yeah, it's an 11th, yeah, absolutely. But it would have to be, it's among them, right?
Right.
So it has to be at the same place, at the same time, to be among them, right? So in this one thing, in this one
I see.
short symbol, we see both the timing and the location of the rise of the little horn. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, among them signifies both the timing of the rise of the timing of the rise of the little horn and its location. So there's our first 2 characteristics. It needs to show up among the 10. Now, when did the 10 show up? When was Rome divided?
That was around 476.
Around 476 AD. So we were looking for the little horn to show up sometime after, to be rising up around 476 AD.
Oh, yes.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yes.
So, this starts to narrow down who could this be, right? And it says it must be among them, that's location as well. So you don't look for the little horn in the New World. You don't look for the little horn in India. You don't look for the New World in Russia. You look for the new horn, the little horn, this new one, in Western Europe. That's where the 10 are. It would be among them. It's got to be there. And it's got to rise a little after 476 AD. It's coming up. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Very
Very plain.
simple, simple interpretation here. Now here are the 10 divisions of Rome again. This is the Western Roman Empire, of course. When it fell, and this, this is an artist depiction. Nothing ever works out perfectly like this. There's little fighting, and the borders get changed and so forth. But this is our artist depiction of basically what we're talking about here: the 10 divisions of Rome. And you can see, you can make this out here. This is the Anglo-Saxons. That's today. That's modern England. All right. The Franks. What's that? Today.
French.
That's France. A lot of these divisions have remained basically the same today. The Visigoths became what is modernly called the Spain, and then the Suevi.
Slavs.
Slavs. We talked about that. Yeah. The Slavs. They became what is referred to as Portugal. You go down the list, and of these 10, 3 of them were destroyed. The Ostrogoths, the Heruli, and the Vandals. They were destroyed. We're going to talk more about that later because that's one of the characteristics of the little horn as well. You can remember those. The Ostrogoths, the Heruli, and the Vandals. 3 of those were destroyed. Okay. So which beast did the little horn come from? That's my next question. There was 4 beasts, right? Which beast did the little horn come from? From the Roman Empire. So we would have to, that's another characteristic. This little horn rises up out of Rome, right? It comes from the Roman Empire. That's another characteristic. That's a key one. So it should be a Roman power. It didn't come out of Greece. It didn't come out of Babylon. It came up out of Rome. Okay. Came from Rome. Next one. Same verse. Verse 8. There's more there. And there's a lot of stuff in this verse. We won't talk about the eyes like the eyes of a man. We'll save that for another. You could ask me about it after, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to go through the main stuff here. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. So remember, of the 10 divisions, 3 of them were destroyed. And this prophecy says 3 of them were plucked up by the roots. Okay? And then verse 20, it repeats the idea, given this is now Daniel repeating the prophecy in verse 20. And he says, and of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up. This is the little horn. And before whom 3 fell. So the little horn comes up, and 3 of the other horns fall before it. You guys see that?
Yeah.
So it conquers 3 of the 10. And here's the last verse. This is the interpretation of verse 24. And you'll notice this is the pattern in Daniel 7. You'll notice this. There's the prophecy given at the beginning. Then the prophecy is repeated around verse 20 and on. Because he's repeating it to... it doesn't say who. We're assuming this is an angel interpreting, because Daniel's in vision and he asks somebody and the interpretation is given. And so he asks somebody around verse 20, and so he repeats the prophecy, and then starting around 23 or so, the interpretation is given. So this is the interpretation of what it means. Verse 24. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise. So Rome's divided up into 10 parts. And another shall arise, notice this, after them. So it did not come up before them. There's 10 of them at the same time. It comes up after them. But it must be at the same time because it conquers 3 of them. So it doesn't mean after them in the sense where they're gone. Right. They're still there because it conquers 3 of them. You can't conquer something that's already gone, right?
Yeah.
So you guys, does that make sense? So it's very specific. After the 10 horns show up, And they're all contemporaneous,
And they're
because he
equal,
conquers 3 of them, yeah.
basically.
And then the little one comes and conquers
Comes
3
and
of them.
conquers.
Absolutely.
Okay.
After them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. So 3 of the horns are conquered. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
All right. Again, so we are looking for which power conquered the Vandals, the Heruli, and the Ostrogos. That would be the other characteristic. All right. Now we're going into identifying who this is. We're going to look at more characteristics, but this is going to make this clear. Daniel chapter 7 again, verse 8. It says he had a mouth speaking great things. A mouth speaking great things. Verse 20, he had a mouth that spake very great things. Verse 25, and he shall speak great words against the Most High. So it's more specific in verse 25 in the interpretation is given. So it's not just saying anyone could walk around saying great stuff, right? I mean, you could be, I don't know, some kind of boxer, and they like to all say how great they are. I'm the greatest, right? You know, anyone could walk around saying great things, but this is very specific. He says he's speaking great words against the Most High. So this is religiously, he's speaking about himself in a religious manner very greatly
A lot of pride there, too.
against God, absolutely.
And my Bible uses the word pompous.
Pompous,
Yeah. Which
pompous
is very
pride, absolutely. So, who fits all these characteristics came up after the 10 divisions of Rome. It's a Roman power, conquers 3 of the 10, and speaks these great pompous, blasphemous words against the Most High. Well, here's a quote from the great encyclical letters of Pope Leo XIII.
Yep.
He says, "We, the popes, hold upon this earth the place of God Almighty." Would that qualify as great words against the Most High?
You betcha.
Pompous words.
Pompous
yes.
words.
Yes.
We, the popes, hold
Popes.
upon this earth the place of God Almighty. That's blasphemy. And that's very proud words. Here's another quote. And here's a picture of the Pope here in his golden throne. I would say that's,
With the 2 cherubims on the side.
yeah, that's pretty much the epitome of
Yeah.
pride there. Yeah, I didn't notice that's in the chair, huh?
Oh, yes,
In
absolutely.
the chair.
The
two
audacity to
cherubims
put himself there, it's just like him sitting in the mercy seat
on the Ark of the Covenant.
on the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
Wow.
Here's from Catholic National, July 1895. The Pope is not only the representative of Jesus Christ, but he is Jesus Christ himself, hidden under the veil of flesh.
Wow. Now that's blasphemy, 100%.
That's blasphemy.
Yeah.
So, here's another characteristic. Now, and this is not to condemn everyone who's part of the Catholic organization. I was raised a Catholic. I'm not condemning Catholics. We're talking about the hierarchy, the leadership.
It's
The Vatican,
Yeah.
that's what we're talking about. And it fits a place in prophecy, just as clearly as Rome does. You know, and that just because you show Rome fits a place in prophecy doesn't mean you're condemning all Roman citizens. You know, it's speaking of the organization. Here's another characteristic here. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn. So it's specifically talked about as being a little. Now, a horn was a king or a kingdom, so this is a little kingdom. This is a little nation. Now, I just looked this up this morning on the internet, and the Vatican is the smallest country in the world, both in size and in population. That definitely qualifies as a little horn. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
But notice this, verse 20, Daniel chapter 7, verse 20, whose look was more stout than his fellows. Does anyone have a different word than stout? Great?
Greater.
Yours says greater?
Yeah, mine says
Strong.
It
greater.
does, yeah.
Mine says greater.
Greater?
Greater.
Yeah, the idea, so he's littler, but he's more
But
powerful.
he's more,
Stout, powerful,
Yeah.
right? So you have this little country that's more powerful than the
more
ones around it.
influential, more.
Yeah.
I mean, you could not describe in better a way of describing the Vatican's power during the Middle Ages, where it was this little kingdom in Italy, but yet it had power over all of Europe. and it had the power to tell other kings what to do. And so all the divisions of the 10 of Europe, they all had to obey the Pope. And if they didn't, there was major problems, wars fought. Yeah, so this is the Vatican flag here
Uh-huh.
with the symbol, their crest. You guys know what this means? This crown is the
The three
triple crown.
crowns. God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Well, they say it's for the Pope is the king of heaven, the earth, and the lower reaches.
Yes.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
And then these keys, do you know what the keys symbolize?
keys.
They say they have the keys to heaven and hell, and they decide who goes to which one.
That's right.
That's what the keys
That's what I
symbolize,
thought it was.
quite literally.
Because
Quite
Christ holds the keys to heaven and hell.
Only,
Yeah.
Only him.
only.
So we fit, right, so far we fit every single characteristic.
But that's a symbol on their, like, the robes or something?
That's their flag,
Oh,
that's the flag.
If you look at the
That's the
Catholic
flag.
flag, yeah.
Yeah, that's the,
And
that's
the
the seal.
cord,
for that.
the cord's binding everything together?
I suppose so, I'm not sure.
Maybe that's the thing that he wears around his neck, right? Doesn't he wear something around his neck, the Pope?
Yeah, different times, yeah, they wear different things,
Okay.
yeah, but this is the official crest, that's the Vatican flag. So far, the characteristics are, it must rise after Rome falls, around 476 AD. It must be a Roman power, now we're talking about the Roman Catholic Church. It must show up in Western Europe among the 10 and conquer 3 of the 10. Now, I didn't go into the history of conquering 3 of the 10, but it did indeed fight wars against the Heruli, the Ostrogoths, and the Vandals. And it was the power that vanquished those 3. It sent armies to conquer these 3, and they were called the Aryan tribes. Now, if you want more history on this, we don't have time to go into, here's a quote from this battle and so forth, because it's kind of messy history. But if you want history on this is a book called by a guy named Heidi Hikes. It's a gentleman. And it's called 508, 538, 1798, 1843, source book. And this has got all the primary history sources. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit of messy history, but all you really have to do if you want to research this is Google search Arian and the divisions of Rome. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Good morning.
And look up the Vatican, type in all those 3 words and you'll find in some history where it talks about, Rome
Write that down.
went to war with what they considered the Arian divisions of the Western Roman Empire. And by Aryan, I'm not thinking, don't think like Hitler talked about the Aryan people. We're thinking in those days, theology Aryan. That meant people who rejected the Trinity.
Oh, I see.
And so their excuse that they say the reason why they conquered those 3 is because they rejected the Trinity, and so that was blasphemy, so they had to kill them. We actually don't even know if they were Arian. There is no sources, we don't have any of their writings, so we don't know what they believed. So we don't know. It could have just been that they didn't accept the authority of the popes, and for some reason or another, they conquered those 3. But that's history. So it came up after 476 AD. It came up in Rome, the Roman Empire. It's a Roman power, conquered 3 of the 10. It's a little horn, but more powerful than the rest, and speaks these great words against God. That fits every characteristic so far.
Sure it is.
That's the Vatican. And only one power fits all those characteristics. If you were to look at the succession of world powers in history, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, Rome's divided. What's the big next thing? If you were to look in a regular history book, what was the big next power after the divisions of Rome? It was the power of the church. The Middle Ages was all about the church.
Oh, yes.
That was the dominant power, the dominant institution of the Middle Ages. That's the little horn. It fits in order. That's the next power. Interesting, right? Okay. Next characteristic. I beheld, verse 21. Can somebody read that for us? Daniel chapter 7, verse 21.
I was watching, and the same horn was making war against the saints and prevailing against them.
So he makes war with the saints.
Mm-hmm.
And then verse 25. Can we read verse 25, please?
He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and law. Then the saints shall be given into his hands for a time and times and a half a time.
All right. Now, there's a lot there, and we're going to go into some of the other parts of it later. But the thing I want you to notice here for now is that it says, he shall wear out the saints of the Most High. Same idea as he will make war with the saints in verse 21. So this is a religious power that makes war with God's people. Now, historically, does the Vatican fit that characteristic?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Unfortunately, it absolutely does. Here's a artist depiction of some of the Inquisitions, some of the torture that was going on during the Inquisition. And here's a quote. This is a quote from History of the Rise and Influence of the Spirit of Rationalism in Europe. It says that the Church of Rome has shed more innocent blood than any other institution that has ever existed among mankind will be questioned by no Protestant with a competent knowledge of history. Now that's quite damning to say they've killed more people than any other organization that's ever existed. But you have to remember, they were in power for over 1,000 years. So it's not like they just went out and did one giant massacre. It was over a long period of time. If you owned a Bible in a language that you could read, it was called the common language, you could be killed if you didn't give it back, recant. You could be burned at the stake for that.
Didn't they kind of have a number or something like that, approximate?
Approximate how many? Yeah, it's
30 million or
estimated
something?
50 to 150 million. It's quite a
okay.
range, but it's
Yeah,
it's in that ballpark there. Yeah, 50 million people over hundreds of years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and you could be killed for just any kind of heresy of disobeying the church. If you did not believe that bread and wine became the literal body and blood of Christ, you could be burned at the stake for that.
And just for the acquisition from someone else
Of
that you were
somebody saying it.
saying it,
Yeah,
an acquisition
yeah.
be brought against us.
Yeah,
Something
somebody
like
say, hey, I heard this person speak blasphemy against the church.
Absolutely.
Well, let's bring him to the Inquisition and
Yeah,
we'll torture him and see if he confesses.
yeah.
No, that was very common, very common. So it definitely made war with the saints. Verse 24, it says, he shall be diverse from the first. So this power is different. So you have all the other 10 divisions of Rome. These are normal kingdoms, small little kingdoms now, France and so forth, all these different kingdoms, England. But this one's different. Now, is the Roman Catholic Church, is the Vatican different than the others? Absolutely. This is now a power that is primarily a religious power. It's a church that's also the state. And it was different. Now, we know that England eventually had a Church of England, but never was it exactly the same. And that was way after. Rome was this Vatican thing was different than anything that had ever existed before. You never had a Christian church that became a country itself and that ruled over the rest of Europe. And when England did it later, there was this combination, but there's always been a little bit of a division between church and state there. They were kind of united, but they're not today. We don't send an ambassador to the Church of England today, right? But we send one to the Vatican. It is completely united, church and state. It's different than all the rest. Does that make sense? So it's diverse from the first 10. Okay? All right, here's another one. We've looked at this before. He shall speak great words against the Most High. We're in verse 25. And shall wear out the saints of the Most High and think to change times and laws. Now the context is of the Most High. Read the first two parts of that verse there. He shall speak great words against who?
The Most
The Most High. He shall wear out the saints of who?
The Most
The Most High. And he shall think to change times and laws. The implication is of who? The Most High. God's times and laws. Now if it was just talking about changing regular old times and laws, that would not be a characteristic that would make it distinct from any other power that's ever existed. All nations have laws and they change and so forth. It's not a big deal. But the fact that it tried to change God's law, that's different. And that fits in this general idea of a little horn that would speak pompous words and proud words. Does that make sense? So it intends to change God's law. And specifically, God's laws that has to do with time. It says it thinks to change times and laws. Now there's only one commandment in the 10 Commandments that is both a law and a time. And that's the 4th commandment, the Sabbath commandment. Did the Vatican attempt to change the 4th commandment? Absolutely. This is from Catholic Record, September 1st, 1923. The Catholic Church is above the Bible, and this transference of the Sabbath observance is proof of that fact. So they say we changed the Sabbath day from Saturday to Sunday. And because of that, that proves that we are greater than the Bible. Your Bible tells you to do this, we tell you to do that. And we're more powerful. Another quote. This is the Catholic University Bulletin, 1942. By what authority did the church change the observance of the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday? So they're saying here, we changed the observance of the Sabbath. This is the 4th commandment, one of God's laws, the only one that has to do with time. Here's the answer. The church changed the observance of the Sabbath to Sunday by the right of the divine infallible authority given to her. So she has divine infallible authority given to her. Right? That's pretty proud.
I know.
Yeah.
Divine
Yes.
infallible authority given to her by her founder, Jesus Christ. The Protestant, claiming the Bible to be their only guide of faith, has no warrant for observing Sunday. Their basic argument is, look, the Bible says keep the Sabbath. We say, no, we changed it to Sunday. So if you're a Protestant and you reject the authority of the Pope, why do you keep Sunday? Because you're supposed to reject our religion, our tradition. You should be following the Bible only, right? So the Protestant, claiming the Bible to be their only guide of faith, has no warrant for observing Sunday. In this matter, the Seventh-day Adventist is the only consistent Protestant. And that is, that's their words, not mine. But they don't think that's a good thing. You know, they later on say, well, just because they're consistent doesn't mean anything good, because they're consistently wrong. Because they're saying it's wrong to follow the Bible only. That's their argument.
And then some
I would
say that it was
disagree.
because of the Jewish, the
Tradition.
Jews,
They tried to distance themselves from the Jews. There was a lot of anti-Semitism
yeah.
in the early Catholic Church, and even in more recent decades. Yeah, trying to distance themselves from the Jews. But you don't distance yourself from the Jews by saying, hey, let's get rid of that 1st commandment too, right? That was something the Jewish people believed in, right? So, did they change God's times and laws?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. All right, here's the last one, and this is going to be a little bit more complicated. Here's this interesting language here, and we'll close with this idea. Verse 25 again. There's a lot in verse 25. He shall speak great words against the Most High. He shall wear out the saints of the Most High, think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time.
Is that what that means? Dividing of time, the half?
Yours
Is it
says
on there? It
half.
says half.
Yeah, mine
of
says
time.
half.
Yeah, depends on the translation you have. Same idea. Half of a time, dividing of time.
Dividing of time.
Half of
Okay.
time, yeah. Same idea.
Okay.
So, what does this mean? They shall be given into his hand, so he has power. Look at here. He's speaking great words, and he's wearing out the saints, and he's changing God's law. For how long will he do this? That's what it's basically saying. How long will he have power over God's people, making war with them, speaking these great words, and changing God's law? How long does he have this power? And this is the amount of time. Until a time and times and the dividing of time. Now, what does that mean? It's a very cryptic way of speaking, right? We don't normally speak of time in these terms. Let me give you guys another verse in the Bible that uses the same time period, and we talked about this when we talked about the Great Harlot. This is Revelation chapter 13, verse 5. Notice the similarities, by the way. He was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. Does that sound similar to the little horn?
Oh, yeah.
A mouth speaking great things? That's the same thing. And he was given authority to continue for 42 months. 42 months. Okay? And then in Revelation chapter 12, verse 6, it says 1,260 days. Now, these time periods are all the same thing. And we'll explain that here in a second. But this time period is spoken of 7 times in the Bible. You know that? 7 times. Now, God apparently likes the number 7.
Completion.
He uses this number 7 over and over.
Form of completion.
Absolutely. Perfection, completion. Yeah.
Right.
And so he repeats this 7 times. Now, when God repeats something, that's because it's important.
It's important.
And if he repeats it 7 times, it's a big deal, right? So let me tell you the 7 times it's mentioned. In Daniel chapter 7, the verse we just looked at, verse 25. In Daniel chapter 12, you guys can turn there real quick if you want. Daniel chapter 12, verse 7. Daniel chapter 12, verse 7. And I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, and he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever, that it shall be for time, times, and a half. Time, times, and half a time. And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. Okay? Go to Revelation chapter 11. So those are 2 of them. Daniel chapter 7 and Daniel chapter 12, that's 2 of them. Here's the next 2, Revelation chapter 11. And can somebody read the first 3 verses for us, please?
I got it. Then I was given a reed like a measuring rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God, the altar, and those who worship there. But leave out the court which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it has been given to the Gentiles. And they will tread the holy city underfoot for 42 months. And I will give power to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth.
Interesting, right?
Mhm.
So you see these 2 time periods mentioned right next to each other. That's showing you it's the same time period. Now think about this. 42 months in a perfect prophetic year, because we're dealing with prophecy here, right? It's idealized when we're talking prophecy. A perfect month, 30 days. You can see that in, for example, the timeline of Noah's flood. It says 150 days, and then it says 5 months. Well, that's 30 days in a month. That's a perfect month. We don't normally have months like that. Some are longer and shorter, but that's, in prophecy, that's what you're dealing with. So 30 days times 42 months gets you
1,260.
1,260. Do the math on your phone if you want, but it'll save you the time. It's exactly 1,260 days. So 1,260 days is the same thing as 42 months. And that's the idea, putting these 2 verses next to each other. Now let's look at the next ones. And by the way, Revelation 11, a lot of people confuse what this is, with the 2 witnesses. I can tell you really quickly, and you don't have to take my word for it because I'm just telling you and I'm not proving it right now because we don't have time to. But the 2 witnesses, that's the Bible. That's the Old and New Testament, the Law and the Prophets. That's the Bible. And you need to look at the verses that this is quoting. It talks about they are the 2 olive trees. What are the olive trees? You go back into Zechariah, and it talks about the olive trees and a symbol giving out oil into the lamp. And it says, what is this? It says, not by my, this is the word of the Lord, saying not by power, but by my spirit. And then it says they're symbolized by Moses and Elijah, which were the 2 great prophets. And you look in the way that they describe the Bible in Jesus' times, and they say things like Paul, I think it was Paul who said, Moses is read every Sabbath in the synagogues. What do they mean Moses is read every Sabbath? Do they mean Moses comes out of the grave and they read Moses? No. What do they mean when they say Moses is read every Sabbath in the synagogues?
Bible is read.
They mean the law, the Old Testament, yeah, the Torah, the writings of Moses. And Elijah was the greatest of the prophets, and they spoke of the Bible as the law and the prophets. Anyway, that's the quick interpretation. Anyway, so this is talking about the Bible being persecuted, being quieted during that 1,260 days. The next time it's found, Revelation chapter 12. And verse 6, can somebody read that?
Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days.
Same time period, same thing. But now we have a woman fleeing to the wilderness for this time period. And the woman, we've described this before, Revelation chapter 12, this is the good woman. This is the woman who gives birth to the Messiah, who has the 12 stars on her crown, symbolizing the 12 tribes of Israel. This is the church. And she flees to the wilderness to hide from the 10-horned beast, which is Rome. And she hides for 1,260 days. Same time period. Were God's people hiding from the religious powers during the time of the Dark Ages? Absolutely. Absolutely. You had the Waldensians hiding in the wilderness.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely it happened. Okay, now go down to verse 14. Somebody read verse 14, please.
Okay, but the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place, where she is nourished for a time and times and a half and a time, from the presence of the serpent.
Interesting. So the woman, same time period again, a time times and half a time. Now, this one, the time and half a time is linked to the 1,260 days, because those two are mentioned in the same chapter, right? In the previous chapter, we had the 1,260 days linked to the 42 months. So now we have all 3 of these different ways of saying this time period. They're all linked together. You guys see that? It's almost if you have algebra and you say A is equal to B and B is equal to C, therefore A is equal to C. Right? There's 3 different ways of saying this time period. 42 months, 1,260 days, or time times and half a time. Now, the time and half a time, that's the one we haven't discussed. We talked about 42 months. It's pretty easy. You just times it by 30, and it's the 1,260 days. What is a time times and half a time? A time, we talked about this last week. In Daniel chapter 4, it talked about the king of Babylon. He went crazy for 7 times until 7 times pass over him. And the interpretation is that's 7 years. A time is 1 year.
Yeah. And times is 2.
Times is the smallest plural you could have, which would be 2.
For 2 years.
And then a half a time, which would be half a year.
6.
So 1 year
Yeah.
plus 2 years is 3, plus a half a
3
year.
and a half.
That's 3.5
adds
years.
to the 42 months.
And
That's
that's
42
exactly the
months.
same as 42 months.
Okay.
That's exactly the same as 1,260 days if you have a 30-day month, a 360-day year. Does that make sense?
Yes. yes.
3.5 years. 3.5 years. But this is prophecy. Now notice, it doesn't come out and say 3.5 years. It gives time in this weird way. Who tells time? When was the last time you heard somebody tell time by saying 42 months?
Yeah, that's it.
Nobody does that.
It's not used.
The joke is, the only people who do that is new mothers, right? So my son he's 42 months old.
Yeah.
He's 3.5
Yeah.
years. Let it go. He's not an infant anymore. Right? But nobody normally does that, right? So just the fact that it says time in this weird way tells you this is symbolic, right? Everything else is symbolic.
Yeah.
The beast is symbolic, the horn is symbolic, the woman's symbolic. Why would this not be symbolic, right?
Yeah.
And so what is the symbol? Well, in Bible prophecy, again, we don't have to make up what the symbols mean. The Bible tells you what it means. In Numbers verse 34, we are told that a day is the same as a year of prophecy. In fact, the word in Hebrew, yom, could mean day or year depending on the context. Depends on the context. So a day is a year in prophecy. So this was a prophecy when the children of Israel disobeyed God and they went to the promised land and they said, oh, we can't do it. And God said, okay, you guys don't want to conquer the promised land, you're afraid of the giants. You're going to wander in the desert for 40 years. The same as you wandered, you searched the land out for 40 days, you get each day for a year. And so God made a prophecy. For 40 years you're going to wander in the wilderness, each day for a year. And so in prophecy, a day is a symbol for a year. The same thing is done in Ezekiel chapter 4, verse 6. This is Ezekiel acting out a prophecy, and he has these symbols he makes. If you read the whole chapter, you'll see he draws Jerusalem on a piece of tile, and he acts out this prophecy. He puts little, like you can imagine, like little armies coming around this piece of tile to symbolize that Jerusalem's going to have armies around it. He acts this whole thing out. And then God tells him to lie on one side. He says, and you shall bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. I have laid on you a day for each year. So in this prophecy that he's acting out, it's a day for a year. So in Bible prophecy, a day symbolizes a year. So going back to this, we had 1,260 days. How many years is that?
Right, that's 1,260.
1,260 years.
That was my first question when I saw that. I said,
Yes.
I'm just going to be quiet for now.
Yes. It came out eventually.
Yeah.
So this beast in Revelation 13 and the little
Reigns.
horn in Daniel chapter 7, they reign for
Beautiful.
1,260 years.
Okay.
Yep. That long period in the Dark Ages where the church was dominant.
That's right.
That's it. That's it. It's right there.
Yep, the dark
You
ages.
can't, if you just pay attention to history, it's over 1,000 years
That's right.
where this power's in. Now, when did this start? You got this time period. When did it start? It started about 538 AD. Now, how do we get to that date? Again, if you want all the history references on this, I'm not going to go into all the details here. You can check the sources here from this book. And there's others that have been written on this. But I'll give you some of the key factors. In 508, the French king Clovis, that's where we get you guys know where Clovis is in Fresno? That's where you get the name from.
Yes, please.
King Clovis. He pledged his military and his civil police to enforce Catholic religious laws in France. So France became a Catholic country. If you don't obey the Catholic Church, the police will come after you, the military will come after you. That was in 508. That was the first country that really did that in a very open way. That is why France is called the eldest daughter of the church. You can look that up. France is called the eldest daughter of the church because they were the ones who first went out and said, we are going to do that. And then the other countries said, hey, that looks like a good idea. The people liked it because everyone was Catholic. The Pope was very happy with them. They're getting kind of political favors. That seems like a popular thing to do. And they all started doing the same thing, one by one. But France did it first in 508. And then by 533, this is just, 25 years later? 533, Emperor Justinian came out with what's called the Justinian Code, where he wrote this group of laws, and in that he said that any law that the bishops and the cardinals write, any religious law that they write, will be enforced by the state. It'll automatically become the law of the land.
Wow.
He's basically given a blank check over to the priest and said, any law you write, we will enforce it for you.
And this
Okay.
all adds up to the horn rising up, Bernie?
This is the horn rising.
Yeah, okay.
Rising to power.
Yeah.
Yep. It started 508 with France it's controlling one country, and then Justinian says, okay, the law of the land everywhere, but it wasn't really enforced fully yet because there were still some pockets of rebellion. Remember, there was the Ostrogoths, the Heruli, and the Vandals, and they weren't fully in conformity with this. So there were some major battles that happened around 538 to really get it so that this Justinian code could be enforced everywhere in Europe. And there were some other things that happened where they actually put a Sunday law in power in 538 and an anti-Sabbath law in power. And so all these things came out. So their power was solidified by about 538 AD. So that's the starting date. Now, it said it would reign for 1,260 years. I'm not going to read all these quotes, but this is a Catholic source. Notice this. Rome has been a government under the popes for some 1,200 years.
Ooh.
I don't know if this guy realizes that he is incriminating his church as fitting Bible prophecy perfectly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1,260 years, that would be 12 centuries, right?
Yeah.
That'd be about 1,200 years.
Certainly.
And they're saying the same thing. Yeah, it was in power about 1,200 years. Isn't it incredible? Here's another quote on it, but they had temporal sovereignty, 1,200 years. And I could give more quotes on this, but so from 538 AD, if we add 1,260 years, we should come to the end of the reign of that little horn. It gets its deadly wound. It's described in Revelation 13. It gets its power back, but that's the end of it, right? So that leads you to 1798 AD. What happened in 1798 AD? From 538 to 1798, they're in power for 1,200 years. What happened? In 1798, the Vatican was basically abolished. This is interesting. Who was the first country to put them in power? The eldest daughter of the church? France. Who took them out of power? France. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
I don't know why, but that's kind of almost poetic justice. General Napoleon, under General Berthier, they had the French Revolution, and it was very anti-priests. They were killing priests in the streets in France. They didn't like the religious powers, and so he sends his General Berthier. Napoleon sends his General Berthier into the Vatican, and there was a couple skirmishes. They almost came like the year before, but prophecy said 1798, so it didn't work out right. And then it's interesting when you read the history. They were gonna come the year before in 1797, and no, something happened where it wasn't the good timing. But God had said, this is the date, right? And then it was like Napoleon's nephew or something like that was killed in Rome. And they took that's their excuse. Okay, we're coming in. And they abolished the papal government. There's no more religious government in Rome. The Vatican is abolished. Took the Pope captive. He died in captivity. It looked like it was the end of the little horn.
It looked like.
It looked like it. It got a deadly wound. It looked like it was gone.
So that's where they get
And then it
the
came
deal
back.
with the Antichrist, having a deadly wound and then
That's it.
recovering from it.
That's it. That's the deadly wound, and then the wound is healed. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, that all makes sense then.
And this happened in February 15, 1798. General Berthier. You can look that up.
Berthier.
Here's the spelling. General Berthier under Napoleon.
Birthday, okay.
In February 15, 1798. He went in and put the end to the 1,260 years. So we have every single characteristic. Now, if you can find another power that reigned for 1,260 years in Europe after the fall of Rome and was a Roman power and changed God's laws and fit all these, please show me, and I'd be happy to reconsider. But until you can find another power that reigned for 1,260 years and fit all these characteristics, I'm sorry,
Well,
this
who's
is
the one? Yeah,
this is
who's
the
it?
only organization that fits all these characteristics. It's the Vatican. It can't be anyone else.
Is there any other close ones?
Not even close. Some people, one of the main people are, what they usually do when they, other interpretations will do one of two things. They will try to divert your attention from the Middle Ages. So they'll say, look before the Middle Ages, look around the 1st century, or look at the end of time. So that's preterism, which means everything's past tense, or futurism, everything's future. But the problem with that is, and I'm glad you asked that question, is it doesn't fit the general theme of the way prophecy works. So what they're saying is that, if you, let's say you're preterism, preterists say that basically all the end time prophecies of Revelation, most of them, all happened around the 1st century. And it's already fulfilled, and that's nothing to bother us now. And we're just living now, and the world just goes on for another 2,000 years with not much anything predicted except for the second coming. Now, the way it's worked so far is that every major event, one after another, without really big gaps, goes on. And history, it just kind of, all the major events are told. A 2,000-year gap doesn't make any sense. So preterism just doesn't fit the general idea. On top of that, the little horn doesn't come up until after Rome's divided and it reigns for this, 1,200 years. It just doesn't work. On top of that, what they do is they'll say, well, the days aren't years, they're just days. The problem with that is if you do that, you destroy Daniel chapter 9, which predicts Jesus' first coming. Because Daniel 9 is also, it doesn't say it's years. It says 7 weeks, and it must be interpreted to be years to show that Jesus would come on that at that time. And so you destroy one of the main prophecies of Christianity if you reject the day for a year principle. And so that's one way they do it. The other way, they put it at the end of time. Now again, you have the same problem. You have one power, next power, and then nothing for almost 2,000 years, and then everything else at the end of time.
That's right, yeah.
And they say, well, after the church is gone, and the church gets raptured up, and we don't see any of this. Have you heard this idea? The church gets raptured up, and then all the end time stuff, the Antichrist shows up, and you don't worry about it. Everything happens at the end of time. Same problem. What's this giant gap in the middle? God didn't say anything about the church ruling Europe for 1,200 years. He didn't have anything to say about that. That doesn't make any sense. So it doesn't fit. They say Antiochus Epiphanes. Actually, you know what? We're going to go into Daniel chapter 8 next week, and we can talk a little bit more about that next week. But they don't fit. None of them fit every single one of the characteristics.
Great job, brother.
Good stuff,
Yeah.
huh?
Great job.
Does anyone have any other questions?
Yeah, could you repeat all this?
It's recorded. It's recorded.
It's recorded.
Watch it out.
Did you get what he just talked about?
Just go back.
Good.
I missed that whole first hour. All right. We did do about an hour, so why don't we close with the word
That
of
was
prayer?
wonderful.
Anybody want to volunteer for us?
Okay, I'll
Please.
pray.